So, let's talk about something else. Even as the government sound optimistic of economic recovery following early partial settlement of the Eurobond, the Auditor General Nancy Githungu says that the country is not yet out of the woods. The Auditor General says the IMF sustainability analysis shows Kenya is in breach of 4 of 6 indicative threshold for debt burden indicators, meaning the country is at higher risk of debt distress. The Auditor General, who made submissions before the Parliamentary Budget and Appropriations Committee, said that the crisis is compounded by unapproved withdrawals by the government over and above the original approved budget, amounting to 10 billion shillings.
I want to thank this committee and the National Treasury for
Nancy Githungu, the country's chief auditor, appeared before the Budget and Appropriations Committee to make her presentation on the 2024 budget policy statement, when she revealed that the country's debt burden is still a matter of huge concern, both locally and globally.
The IMF debt sustainability analysis for 2022 established that Kenya is in breach of 4 of the 6 indicative thresholds for debt burden indicators, namely the present value of public debt to GDP ratio, the present value of public debt and public debt to revenue and grants ratio, the present value of public and publicly guaranteed external debt to exports ratio, and the public and publicly guaranteed debt service to exports ratio. This implies, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members, that the country is at a higher risk of debt distress.
The Auditor General also cited a somewhat careless nature which has been employed by subsequent governments to seek additional funding over and above the original approved budget through supplementary budgets, resulting in assigning of resources to activities that have not undergone scrutiny or approval by Parliament or even public participation.
Honorable.
In her report, the Auditor General cited an occurrence where ministries, departments and agencies in subsequent governments have requested and utilized a total of 1.6 trillion shillings without approval over the last 9 years.
Ministries, departments and agencies had been requesting for additional funding over and above the original approved budget by Parliament, which total to Kenya shillings 1.644 trillion over the 9 years. In the realm of budget execution, there is a credibility risk looming when budget resources are assigned to activities that have not undergone scrutiny or approval by Parliament or public participation.
Members of the Budget Committee seem to agree.
What the executive is doing is basically a mockery of the budget process. Something like what I would call the Kimalel goat auction is a better organized system than what we have here.
In the financial year 2020-2021 and financial year 2022-2023, the Executive Office of the President, State Departments for Planning, Transport, Housing and Infrastructure have increased their budgets by 10%. Consequently, Githungu says this indicates that the revenue and expenditure are not grounded in realism and do not reflect the country's prevailing economic circumstances.
Revenue leakages, delayed exchequer releases, and fiscal indiscipline without requisite sanctions or consequences. I have reiterated previously to this committee that the public sector must transition to accrual basis of accounting to enhance transparency, accountability, and the disclosure of assets and obligations.
According to the Auditor General, the country's expenditure estimates have grown by 51% from 3.1 trillion shillings to slightly over 4 trillion shillings between the year 2018 and 2024. But the actual expenditure increased by 33% from 2.9 trillion shillings to 3.2 trillion shillings. This was against an actual ordinary revenue growth of 43%, which is 2 trillion shillings from 1.5 trillion shillings.
The persistent expenditure pressures and stagnated revenue-raising efforts has resulted to an increase in borrowings from both the domestic and foreign markets to fund the budget deficits. There is need to give due consideration of performance in revenue collection for prior years before setting the revenue projections for subsequent years.
Githungu now suggests that the Budget Committee ought to base its revenue projections on performance of revenue collection in prior years. The Auditor General has also noted with concern that the current government, led by President William Ruto, has made several global commitments which are not tracked or included as part of the budget policy statements to inform the Budget Committee and the National Assembly on priority areas. Githungu has warned that the budget-making process in the country could continue losing credibility if there is no predictability with regard to revenue and expenditures. Nimro Tabu, Citizen TV.